Hey everybody, welcome to The Commit. We're back in the studio. It actually hasn't been just you and me in a little while, Richard.
Exactly. It's like where it all started, Neil.
Exactly.
Except this episode's not going to be like an hour and a half long, right?
No, it's going to be like 5 minutes, promise. So today we wanted to talk a little bit about following up. Let's say you've met someone.
Okay.
You know, maybe it's at a job fair, right? You've come up to me and you've said, oh, hey, I met you at your table. You know, you come up and have that interaction. What happens after that?
Right, so obviously we mentioned this before in an earlier episode, but the importance of follow-up after job fairs is absolutely critical. So let's imagine a scenario. So you come up to us, you talk to us at a job fair, you're really interested in an opportunity at that company. One of the key things you want to make sure you do is then send someone a follow-up email kind of the morning after the job fair. But understand that that person's going to have talked to a lot of different people at the job fair. Make sure you include who you were and try and reference some part of that short conversation. So if you do that, you just kind of get back in someone's front of mindset, and then I think you massively increase the likelihood you'll get a reply from them, and then you can start building that relationship that can lead to all kinds of good things for you.
Sure. Now let's actually skip ahead and let's go to interviews, and then we'll actually come back to applications.
Yeah, definitely. So interviews, the follow-up is absolutely critical. So one of the key things obviously people should be doing at interviews is make sure that you're asking what the next step is going to be. It should always be your last question. So if the interviewer doesn't offer it up, ask for it, say, okay, so what's the next step in this process? When should I expect to be hearing back? Then obviously make a note of that date. And if you haven't heard back on that date, you want to have followed up. But gold star behavior is to follow up the date after the interview, thank someone for their time, say you enjoyed the discussion, ask any follow-up questions you have, but make sure that you kind of send that 24 hours after. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me. That's a great way to make sure that you kind of both kind of leave a good impression, but also I think increasingly, and especially in kind of anything that's customer service, business development, developer evangelism, anything where you're going to be expected to make connections with people, it's absolutely essential that you do that 24-hour follow-up.
Yeah, and if you're worried about, you know, is it okay if I email this person? Of course it's okay. They spent time talking to you. They'll be happy to give you their business card, or you can just write down their email address. And from my business school days, I can tell you that the easiest thing to do is as you're on your way out the door, you're walking out the building after your day of interviews, start making your notes right then, or even start drafting your emails. You don't have to send them right then, but you can write them and then say, okay, in the morning, I'll give it a second look over just to make sure there's no typos, press send, you're done. You've done all the work you need to do, and it took like 5 minutes.
You know, Neil, that also makes me think of a really important point that I want to make sure we address here, which is how you go about following up. So the right way to follow up in 99% of scenarios is going to be sending an email. You certainly shouldn't be coming in person to do your follow-up. I don't think you should be calling the office either, unless you've been expressly told that you can do the follow-up. If someone says, call me next week and I'll give you an update, feel free to make that telephone call. But in general, I would default down to email. Don't send people like a Snapchat message, a Facebook message. Like, these are just not professional ways to follow up, but a well-written email is.
Honestly, 2 lines after maybe 2 weeks is enough, and you're probably going to decrease the frequency with which you follow up with someone over time. If it's taking 2 months to get in touch with someone after an interview, one of 2 things is going on. One, that company has a really difficult hiring process, there's a lot of bureaucracy, and maybe you can just wait it out. Or 2, it's time to take the hint, it's time to move on.
Definitely my mode of operation is, if after 2 follow-ups I've not heard anything back, I need to find a new contact. That at that point, that kind of lead has probably gone cold.
Right, or find the new opportunity.
Yeah, totally.
Nothing wrong with that either.
So talking about opportunities, Neil, we should totally talk about following up on applications. It's a massive pain point for people, right? And you know, usually the scenario is you put out an application, maybe you hear back, maybe you don't, but it's clearly something that causes people a lot of anxiety. They don't know entirely what to do. So unfortunately, the answer to this isn't intensely simple. Ideally, your follow-up at a company should be going in tandem with your application. And what I mean by this is that most companies these days use an applicant tracking system. So what this means is you're going to apply online, it's going to go into something like Lever or Greenhouse, and the company is going to be using this to track the application through their system.
Right, you're not applying to necessarily a specific person. You might not know who that person is.
Exactly, so really important that you get into that system. But at the same time, in parallel, it's a good idea to be checking your network, looking on LinkedIn, asking around via mutual contacts, and seeing if you can develop like a personal contact there. then the right way to do that is if you do it in parallel, you can send a message to that person and say, hey, I have some questions about this role I'm applying for. Here's a copy of my application. I submitted it via this link, and then you can show people where it is and say, I'd love the opportunity to talk to someone involved in this role. Let's just recap a few of these points for people, right?
Sure.
Mode of follow-up, email trumps anything else. So after meeting someone in person, if you meet someone at an event, follow up the morning after. If you meet someone at a job fair, follow up the next day. Always send a follow-up email after an interview. That email needs to go within 24 hours. You need to thank the interviewer for their time, ask any follow-up questions. And definitely when you're looking at applications, try the best you can to develop contacts within the company in tandem with that so that you can have like a real name and a real person you can ask questions to about that. So I think if you do all those things, Neil, you're going to get a lot better response in my opinion.
Absolutely. Plus, if nothing else, they'll think you're polite.